Right, good morning everybody to this West Mercia Police and Crime Panel meeting on the 6th of November. Councillor Barry Durkin, and I want to welcome everybody heartily. Any Shrewsbury? Oh yeah, sorry. Hey again. Welcome everybody to the West Mercia Police and Crime Panel, 6th of November 2024. I'm Councillor Barry Durkin, and we are here at Shrewsbury discussing the current iteration of the West Mercia Crime Panel with PCC. But I remind everybody to make sure that you are in speaking distance of the microphone, because it has a problem if you are too far away. Right, thank you. Shall we start it? We have name substitutes. Councillor Colin Taylor, again, welcome, for Councillor Roger Evans. And we have apologies and declarations, next item. We've got apologies.
Okay, and we've got apologies from Councillor Roger Evans, Helen Jones, Kelly Middleton, Raj Mehta.
And also the Temperature Councillor Richard Cooper. Are there any declarations of interest from any councillor here? No, thank you very much. Looking for confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting on 16th of September. Looking for the accuracy of the minutes. Does anybody want to propose that the minutes are accurate? Thank you. Seconder. Thank you. There's accurate. Now, the next item on the agenda is the Police and Crime Panel Plan Activity and Performance Monitoring Reports. Now, before we start, Commissioner, there was a lot of disquiet in the room before you attended because of the very late publishing of Q2 reports. And this is, as I understand it, 5 weeks overdue. This, in effect, means that we cannot look forward into what you're envisaging. All we have is your draft report, and we need to make sure that that goes forward appropriately. There was discussion of deferring this matter because of the inability to scrutinise what you have proposed. But we decided in the end to hear what you put forward and assume that it is accurate and will be accurate going forward. There's no disrespect for you. We did look at Q4 23-24 in July, and this was overdue as well. This isn't what we want to see. We need to ensure that you provide us with the information at least 1 week before the meeting, so that we can actually scrutinise it, and thus making it a meaningful panel meeting. Because we can't corroborate what's being said by all, then we are perhaps going down a tortured path. And I will be writing to you on this, Commissioner. Now, would you like to explain why the Q2 report is 5 weeks overdue?
Hi. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, panel. The premise of your statement isn't correct. So the quarter, there is always a lag afterwards for the analysis and the presentation of the information. So the information is always available approximately a month after the end of the quarter, always. What has happened here is that the timescales to turn around a publishable version of the police's report and the papers being issued here has come into conflict. So the paper that you have before you is written based on the right data, and then the appendices to which you're referring to is now published on my on my website. We have the option, if we don't want the very latest of data, and it would still be in line with the law and all the other bits and pieces, to have considered the previous quarterly report to which you referred to. I think it's in the panel's interest to have the most up-to-date information, hence why the attempt has been made to refer to the very latest available quarter. That said, I am disappointed that the force haven't provided me with a report in the timescale that should have been expected, and it has already been taken up with the force. But I can reassure you that the information written in the report that you had within the timescale is accurate, is referenced in the appendix that's now published, etc., etc. So you have the right information. What you didn't have in a timely fashion is the publication of the appendices. But as I allude to, we will take that up and discuss with you as to whether it would be better to have only the Q1 report, which would have been the best part of 5 months out of date. But I happily take yours and the panel's advice as to what information they want.
Right. Thank you for that, Commissioner. A couple of things. Any report is essential. You know that. We all know that. And when it's not available until this morning, or even last night, it does hobble us somewhat in providing a proper scrutiny of your plan. We must be sure the information is correct. Of course, we must. But without the information, how can we be sure? Perhaps, is there a way that you could consider the publishing more effectively? Or because this time it didn't happen, and this is not something I would like to see recur.
So I'm very conscious we're in an open forum, Chairman, but I would suggest to you that between my office receiving it and it being published was under half an hour. So I can reassure you I take every human effort possible to ensure the information is published when we received it. And not everything is in my gift. I can assure you we have taken it up with the force. But I come back to the papers that were written are based on the very latest information, as I understood the panel wanted. In ordinary circumstances, the appendix would have been published last week. But as I say, it wasn't my information to publish, and we published it within half an hour of it being available. But as I say, I will happily work to see whether or not there's a different approach to come in the future. There is an unfortunate timing element of this particular meeting, which we don't normally suffer from. But if the panel want a different approach, we can do that.
It's not a different approach as such, or accurate information available within time. So I'm not going to press this any further, because as I said earlier, all the information we get is essential for us to consider how we go forward. And I thank you for that. I don't doubt you put it out within half an hour. You assured me of that. My concern is the interim between it being prepared and coming to your desk. So what I'll do now, what we're going to do is we're going to review agenda item agenda item 6 in as much detail as we can with the information provided by your office, and we will come back at a later date to consider Q2 information. So we have an addition, which is what we have covered here. At paragraph 83, it does say that the quarterly report is available, and this has now been it is now in place. So paragraph 83, and that answers some questions now. Right, so we're looking at the police and crime plan activity and performance monitoring report. And members of the panel are invited to consider this report. Do we have anybody who wants to make any observations on this report as it is? I beg your pardon. Please, Commissioner.
Thanks, Chairman. It's useful to, I think, just to draw very briefly, if I may, some observations to the panel. Firstly, around the police and crime plan development, an integral part of my commissionership. We are now in the final throes of finalising, having ran the consultation which closed in October. We are literally just putting the document through publishing, and then we will publish the document in the coming weeks. Our engineering panel are informed when that published version is out there. And the other big bits of news in relation to my commitment to deliver a victims hub, we've discussed it previously. We now have a project manager in place, and indeed the recommissioning is well underway, and I would suggest an area potentially for interest from the panel in the future as that new victim hub starts to take shape, and indeed how it will actually manifest itself, and indeed any performance measures associated with it, I think will be particularly interest to the panel in the future. There's two other things I just wanted to briefly touch on. Firstly, around criminal justice, and then around budget. Criminal justice is a particular concern, not least of which the continued backlogs in the Crown Court, particularly the lack of consistency across West Mercia, i.e. We have parts of West Mercia where the backlog is still getting longer rather than shorter, and indeed then laid over the top of the recent two early release from prisons. I have been reassured by the probation and others around the two releases, but ultimately it does mean that there is a greater number of offenders being managed in our communities than were before, and it will likely cause further issues in terms of reoffending rates. And it is another area where not only I will be providing further scrutiny to, but also I'd imagine be interested in the panel. And the last point I was just going to make was around the budget. We saw the statement from the Chancellor, and I just wanted to bring some of it to life for the panel. I am concerned that policing and the criminal justice system didn't get a lot of airtime. Nearly a 2-hour speech. I get not everything can be in there, but policing was particularly absent, some reference to town centres and to shoplifting. But there were some major announcements around things like NI. And to put it into perspective, the pay award that's been announced mid-year this year, the full impact of next year, and the changes in the NI amount to roughly £8.5 million of additional pressure. And the reason why I just want to highlight to the panel this building pressure is that I am now concerned. So we have had a new government, absolutely fine. We have a new comprehensive spending round, again, absolutely fine. But I'm worried that the not only the usual inflationary pressures that we all have to manage, there are some building pressures that we're going to need urgent clarity from government as to how it's going to be funded, because that £8.5 million out of a £280 million budget is now starting to represent sizable chunks when you add on other inflationary pressures. And the thing I would just leave in your mind as to probably why I'm more worried about it than maybe I appear, I have a workforce in West Mercia Police that is now predominantly police officers. We're very proud of the growth that we've had. But if I'm to protect the police officer numbers, that means my ability to save the money from the rest of the spend is ever smaller. So when we talk about percentages of overalls, fine. But then when we talk about £8.5 million of the percentage of the amount of the budget I actually have control over, the pressure is, I would suggest, mounting. Now, there are a number of local authority councillors around the table who have that same pressure, I would imagine, and being briefed as a result. But in policing, it will be particularly acute, and I'm, through my PCC colleagues and directly with the government, seeking urgent clarification when they use phrases like public sector will be protected from the NI rise, for example, because if we aren't, we have some huge problems to which need to be addressed fairly urgently. And I would suggest to you the answers that we get from the dispatch box aren't always the same in the detail when they come through in settlement. And if this arrives in clarification of the settlement just before Christmas, that gives us even less time to respond to set a balanced budget in time for the start of the new financial year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'm sure the councillors around the table are very much aware of the constraints that have been put on to us, and are grateful in some respects for the non-NI action. Thank you. Apologies for cutting you off before. We now look at the agenda item 6, police and crime activity and monitoring report. Has anybody here got any comments? Start with?
Yeah, thank you. I was just interested in the consultation that you launched in September with the public on the police and crime plan, and just wondering what sort of response you've had and when the consultation runs to.
So consultation closed now on the 7th of October. We ran a consultation on a draft version, i.e. we weren't looking for themes, we were saying this is our proposal. I haven't got the overall stats in front of me in terms of the response. Have you got them? Yeah. I have got them. Sorry, I'm too far down. Sorry, yes, paragraph 7, that's quite correct. 700 respondents took part, 423 in the online survey, and we then took a number of opportunities to go out and about. I recognise not everybody is an online respondent in terms of we did not only engagements at events, but also Vox Pop style engagement in High Street. In terms of the overall numbers, it's not particularly high in the grand scheme of things, but I think a good representative result of something that is a fairly largest complex document, therefore harder to give some of those elements of detail that perhaps we would have. What I would say is one of my commitments this year is to do more in terms of consultation around particular issues, and we are just running at the moment a lighter consultation in terms of such around road safety, to which we're just doing some A&A work on, and we've had over 2,000 responses of that type thing. So we are very keen to see how we get a greater portion of responses from the public, so their view can be included.
Liz.
Can I just follow up? I think in future it might be a better way of getting them more. I don't understand the problems of consultation, but I do think it's a particularly low response given the public you're serving, and it might be better in future to write to all councillors, for instance, across all the areas, to just try to think about how you can try to secure a better response in future. So my only comment.
Can I pick up on, because it's spot on, they do get circulated out through, the panel, HALC, SALC and CALC across the 3 areas. But I also recognise, spot on, don't concur, there's lots of stuff out there asking for people's information. What I'm particularly interested from especially from the local councillors is, you'll know up in Oswestry there'll be particular either Facebook groups or other community groups to which there will be abilities to circulate through. So any help you and your colleagues can give in terms of getting it disseminated into those groups really helpful, because I'll never be in the spotted in Oswestry or whatever the equivalent is. But any help there, very grateful. But your point is one well made.
Liz, you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for the detail, including the closure of the public consultation dates in your report that we all had obviously read. You say that it's a small but a representative response. What is a representative response for the West Mercia region in public consultation terms, and has the demographic mix of the forced area been represented in the responses that you've received, or are there some demographic groups that are underrepresented in terms of your consultation not having reached them? As a councillor, I have to say that your the existence of your public consultation did make it to my inbox, and you know, I would imagine for other Herefordshire councillors as well. So we did pass it on, but I'd be interested in your information about representation and demographic mix. Thank you.
I'm not an expert in statistics. Gareth, you don't just want to outline as to, because in a very broad sense, the weight to which we can give things, I have to think there is degrees in terms of what is statistically significant and what confidence we can have on things. My overall assessment as a lay non-statistical person is that it isn't at the highest end of that confidence. But in terms of understanding why we are confident this is representative, Gareth, you just want that outline.
So in all the consultation work we do, as long as I've been with the OPCC anyway, we've always seen around 1,000, if you check the calculators online, 1,000 respondents is generally requisite for, I think it's a 95% confidence level and a 4% interval, which is kind of the industry standard in terms of survey work. So that's kind of the benchmark that we've always kind of thought, okay, that gives us a good level of confidence. However, when you also marry up the quantitative and the qualitative in terms of some of the face-to-face work we've done, and you cross-reference it against the online responses we've had, you can kind of get a better sense of it, I suppose, in terms of if the responses you're getting face-to-face are marrying up with what you're getting online. And equally, if the face-to-face work has given us exposure to different demographics of people and different elements of our community that we might not have been able to reach through our sort of targeted online work as well. But we don't know specifically all the demographics. We do collect some demographic data, but not everything in that context.
Come back. Thank you. I recognise you're speaking as a lay person in the context of statistical analysis. However, saying that it is a representative sample is a meaningful statement. And certainly as a member of this panel, I think, you know, it is important for us to be assured that you're getting to older people, you're getting to younger people, you're getting to disabled people, and also that the responses that you're getting across your force area are covering, give a reasonable coverage in each of the geographical areas, and that there isn't, you know, there aren't not spots there, because certainly when it comes to your performance reports, the breakdown to the sub areas of the force region does show significant variation in terms of the types of crimes that are present there, and obviously the kind of social issues on the ground that the force is having to deal with. So I would like to be assured in terms of the geographical spread and the demographic mix. And I recognise it isn't always straightforward because people don't necessarily want to give you the detail that provides you with the information you need in order to recognise a response as being as ticking some of the relevant demographic and geographic boxes. But I think if you explain in the consultation why these questions are being asked and why it's important, it may be that people give you the responses that they may be reluctant to provide.
So, recognising I'm not a statistics expert, so I have confidence because I saw the plan and I have had the professional advice afterwards that I can rely on the consultation as a you know, and I'm trying not to use the word that you told me not to use, but I'm confident that it is a good response that is representative of the community that I can have some confidence in. And I probably used the word that I wasn't supposed to, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. which is in stark contrast to the road safety survey that I'm doing at the moment, because it is a general seeking of opinion rather than a targeted looking at all the areas that maybe we might not have heard from, or indeed are underrepresented, and all those kind of things that would have happened in the police and crime plan consultation. Now, neither of these are perfect. I absolutely tick that, but there is a much more nuance in how we would run a police and crime plan consultation versus a survey we're doing around the ANA at the moment. Now, in a perfect world, I would be able to do both, wouldn't I? I would be able to apply both to both, but we don't have that capacity or ability at the moment. So therefore, it's police and crime plan element. We will make sure that that extra effort is put in. The other element that we haven't touched on is how we use things like the independent advisory groups that work within West Mercia Police that represent some of those underrepresented groups, and ensuring that we also use that as part of the maximising. I think police and crime plans, all strategic documents, are not necessarily ignite the imagination of our community. So linking to the worth of it, I think, is really important. And in this plan, we've attempted to put it much more into straight language, non-public sector type language that the public can hopefully identify with. But happily, if there are views of the panel afterwards in the way that I've run the consultation, or others in terms of a wash-up feedback around consultation on the plan, very useful to have, because in 4 years' time there will be another plan written, and having that learning identified really helpful.
Not come back, you know, become many elements, people waiting.
Thank you. Noting the significance of the output of these surveys and how this data is used to inform your forward plans or to provide you with reassurance that you're focusing on the right areas. From the numbers I've read here, almost a quarter of those who started the survey didn't complete it. So I was wondering, having interrogated the information you've got from those incomplete surveys, what reasons do you think there are between a quarter of the people who started not finishing?
So, Gareth, I think I'll have a view, but mine would be it would probably be a bit long in terms of the ability to commitment to sit down and do it, and the ability of our software to manage your expectations to do that is we're learning now. It's not unusual, and Gareth will probably correct me in terms of the usual non-complete rate, but having done the survey myself, even though I know the subject and maybe looking at a different lens, it was probably a little long for wanting the large numbers, i.e. at the moment, didn't quite have to make a cup of tea and a biscuit, but it did require a pause in the day to engage and do it. Now, it's a serious, important subject, isn't it? So of course it should be taken seriously, but the time commitment was fairly, I don't think predisposed to the high levels of the conversion to completion rates.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you think about it as an electronic survey, that the medium is not necessarily conducive to long attention spans for people these days, myself included. I'm not immune to that, but you know, the media that people consume online tends to be literally 5 to 10 seconds long at times. So something that takes even a minute or two to complete is a stretch in terms of trying to keep people engaged through that medium. That's one of the reasons why we try and focus some of our demographic capturing as well, in terms of we're desperately keen for people to complete the surveys and to give their views without them getting bored and ditching it halfway through. And it's always a real balance, particularly with complex things such as a police and crime plan or a lot of our business, to be fair.
I guess my point is that it doesn't matter how well advertised it is, if it's not usable, you're not going to necessarily get the information you want. So perhaps, as you've done with the road survey, that's road safety, breaking it up into individual chunks, and so therefore spreading out through the year, people might get a bit of survey fatigue, but you might perhaps get the information in smaller chunks, or you know, there are other ways to overcome that obstacle. So thank you.
Thank you.
I wasn't going to say this, but how long have you been doing these surveys? Surely you should know by now what's a bit wrong and what isn't a bit wrong. You know, these are young people. I've seen them on surveys and they're very, very quick at doing them. And if they're interesting enough, and that's my answer to you, you should have worked it out before you did it. And I'm sorry, it just isn't on. After all the years, I mean, how many terms has it been in now? We should know by now what surveys should be like and what they shouldn't be. But that wasn't the question I was going to ask. Shropshire has launched a new toolkit aimed at reducing drugs among young people. I'd like to know is to prevent harm reduction and prevent education in schools about it. What age does this start? That's one of my questions. What age do you start and what age does it finish? It doesn't say anything about that in this report. The next bit is Shropshire is focusing on young adults aged 18 to 29 with a balancing increase in treatment admissions, positive recovery outcomes. You never say how many finished this, how many people did it help. It doesn't say anything like this in this report, and it should do. It should tell you at the end of each thing what you've done and how you've got there. And it doesn't do that. You've got 2,506 police officers. You need to support the delivery of key objectives, yes, but it doesn't really say much about the objectives that you really want to cover. And over the large area we have in Shropshire, does this really cover it when you've only got 2 police officers in Ludlow? I don't think so. If you're going from Bishopscastle all the way to Church Stretton and different areas and Ludlow and everything, how can 2 police officers get around it all? I think you had a bit of a flap when you came to the meeting that we had at Ludlow Town Council. They're not very happy with some of the things that are going on, including drugs and everything. So really, you're not talking to stupid people here. We want to see a better, not a very good report. It's like somebody sat in a little office and thought, I'll just put a little bit of that in and a bit of that in, and it'll cover it. No, I'm sorry. If you're going to tell us something, will you finish it up with what you've done and what you haven't done? Because this report isn't right.
Always grateful for Councillor Harry's considered feedback, and we'll take it appropriately on board.
Thank you. That's very good of you.
Thank you, Commissioner. John.
Okay. I want to come back to the consultation process because I think it's actually quite important. Then determining the confidence level of which you're actually placing these responses to. So the question would be, how fit is it for advising on the decisions and the decisions that flow from that? So it would seem that if you've got an imbalance in the demographics of people responding, that would then affect the decisions that you would make. So you could have a bias in one direction, but it's not necessarily warranted or the overall situation that's faced. And so it would give a better understanding and weighting to the decision process if you knew what that demographic was, how, what's the gender constituent of it, what's the age constituent of it, what's the geographic constituent of it, what are the topic ranges covered within those. And so coming back onto that point is, how really is the design of the consultation? Does it take any of those factors into account? And then do you actually put a weighting? If you do you actually put any weighting on that? Because it's got to advise you on how you actually make those decisions rather than just the bare number side of it and the tabulation. This is important or that's less important. You have to actually understand underneath the context in which those statements or those responses have been made. So I'm asking really about the design of it because I don't get a picture at all from how it's really been designed and therefore can't make a judgment upon whether it's effective enough. And the question would be, can you make a judgment on how effective it it is? And if so, can we, as the panel, receive some more information that would help us to understand that?
So I'll get Gareth just to pick up some of the technical detail. But the first part is this is a plan consultation based on an election. So the first part of it is the political promises that are made. So some of it is about the technical detail within the plan. So the premises of the do should have been sorted out at the election, shouldn't it? So there should be very little in there that wasn't talked about at the election process. So this isn't the only consultation element of it, but your technical points about how we have the confidence in it being representative. Do you want to pick up, Gareth?
Yeah, so we do have, as I said earlier, we do have some of the demographic information in terms of ages, geographic spread, genders, ethnicities, these kind of things. We do have them, and they are taken into account in terms of when we present them to the PCC and he considers the feedback. So they are there, they are present. We have not included everything in for the sake of a summary activity report, but we have them. We've considered them as an office, and we do capture them.
Liz, you want to have a question?
No.
Thank you very much. I have a question, Commissioner. You mentioned earlier on about the clarity of the government funding coming through. I'm looking at your recommissioning program, which is quite a lot of inputs. Two questions. One, have you taken in, or as your project manager taken into account, the Sartori Bluestone Home Office lessons they learned in 2022 with regard to this? And are you confident that with the extent of this, in the current financial situation, you are capable of fulfilling all that you said?
So yes, for the first part. In relation to I think what you're saying is, have we got the money to do the things we're aspiring to do? So it will be choices. So the way that we are recommissioning, we have asked for service levels, i.e., what could be done for different levels of funding. But I struggle with a bit that having to dial down our aspiration as to how we support victims in our society. But this is what ultimately we will do in terms of the amounts of money that we have available. But the procurement process, a recommissioning process, does include in with it different levels of spend that ultimately mean we will make some choices at the end of it. But I think it's a pretty sad day, if I'm honest, because I want to provide the best victim service, not the getting by levels that maybe we've put up with in the past. We've made a lot of progress around how victims are supported, and I want to see that built on rather than us having to dial down. But as I come back to, we have asked for those options, and when I ultimately make the decisions, we will of course have affordability at the heart of it. One thing I am doing, and it does link back to a former Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner's time, that we've reset a lot of these contracts over multi-year rather than being annual, year on year. So whatever deal we end up striking will be across a medium term rather than the annual funding lurch that we may be used to find ourselves in.
Yeah, thank you. I think the panel agrees with your aspiration of giving the best victim support that we can, and I think we'll have our full support in that. Nigel.
Yeah. But it's actually about the consultation, which we moved on that. Right, we'll put that on to bed.
Okay. Right. Thank you for that. Anybody else got any comments about the gender item that we're discussing? Liz.
Yeah, I thought we were just looking at the plan element. There was a suggestion that we were going to go on and look at the performance element of the report. Are we not going to do that?
We are, yes, we're discussing this. The document has this submitted.
Okay. I do have some questions on the performance side of things. even though we've not been provided with the up-to-date information in time to give it a close look. However, I have been giving it a cursory glance while we've been in the room here today. And I've got a couple of questions. One to do with the statement in the report and one to do with the data that's just been provided online. The question to do with the information in the report is, you state in the report that you are not meeting the force level targets for action taken outcomes. And why is this? And what are you doing to make progress on that? And if we can cover that first before I talk about data.
As the panel will know, that being here a while, the focus on quality of investigations has had some airtime, both through HMI findings, but also previous performance reports. The infamous budget, where the panel attempted to potentially veto it, actually was because I wasn't able to articulate clearly the shift to investment in investigations. It would be my reflection, and so this is a subject that's been around a while. And the focus of it is around investigative quality, so capturing the original report, but then the investigation that has followed as a response. And the different times that we have been found lacking by HMIC has tended to focus around investigative quality. So at the heart of that, there are a number of things that drive investigative quality, but that is the central focus of it. I would also suggest to you that the change in the balance of the workforce in length of service is also a challenge, in terms of we have recruited significant numbers, so therefore that balance on some shifts between longer serving and much shorter serving than we particularly had in the past. So therefore having other organisational interventions to ensure that investigative quality is maintained. And then the one element which I don't think that we have particularly touched on is the complex. So I would hope if members looked at the data, they would see that actually the complex there is good outcomes for. It is the volume crime to where that investigative quality isn't, investigative outcomes isn't at the level that it should be. So therefore, the focus under Alex Murray, continued by Richard Cooper, is to make sure that the volume crime element also has that focus, and that will also assist with the percentage terms, won't it, as well? Because I look at things like murder, really good rate of getting an outcome in murder, which is what you would expect. But then you look at the volume crimes outcomes, particularly poor. So there has to also be that greater success in the volume element. But a really complex area of business. My 3-minute summary probably doesn't do it justice, but it is, I think, one of the challenges in my police and crime plan discussion earlier. When we talk about cutting crime, it's not just about crime coming down, which it is. It's also the justice that's being delivered for those victims of crime, as the number of victims get smaller.
Thank you, Commissioner. Of course, the volume crime is the crime that is experienced by the majority of people in the force area. So I take your point about the very serious crimes, but in terms of maintaining and maybe addressing force confidence issues from the public, it is important that the volume crime is dealt with, so that people don't lose confidence and think that there's no point even reporting stuff when nothing ever happens. And I think this is felt particularly in the retail community, where shoplifting and the police response to shoplifting has lost the confidence of many in the retail sector. So, you know, that may be considered, you know, at the volume, but sort of low impact end of things. But it is a worry for the businesses that are being hit by that kind of crime, especially when the message seems to be that, you know, it's a penalty that they take and that there isn't any penalty for people committing the crime. Going on to the data, and this is linked to one of the other agenda items that we have on our meeting today. But the rape figures in South Worcestershire have gone up by 20% on last year's figure at over 160 year to date. And domestic abuse in that sub area of the force is up 3%. Have you got any views on why that is in that particular area in terms of bucking the trend of other parts of the sub-force area? And also victim satisfaction in the context of stalking for the force area is down from 92% to 72% from April last year to now. And looking at sub-force area, South Worcestershire again has gone from a 92% satisfaction rate to 73, and in Herefordshire it's gone from 100% to 72, which again is you know, two sub-force areas with quite a worrying trend on that particular activity, especially given the action that we're told in the next agenda item has been being implemented certainly over almost the last 12 months. Would you care to comment?
So, at the risk of inviting the annoyance of the panel, and very conscious of the debate we had at the beginning of the meeting around the timeliness of the performance information, because the performance information is so fresh, I haven't yet done my audit and assurance, my accountability and assurance work around that paper. So, in the normal cycle of things, it doesn't happen towards until the end of this month, i.e. when it gets drawn out. So some of what I'm talking about is just opinion, Councillor Harvey, in terms of I haven't yet held the Chief Constable to account over it. So in relation to the stalking changes, some of that will be very volume dependent in terms of the volume involved would be my contention. In relation to the DA and rape, I would imagine they are linked, again, without having done the analysis, i.e. the instances being in a domestic abuse setting. But again, both those would be my opinion and contention rather than having the understanding, because when we go through with the force, we would look at the anomalies, the changes, the ups and the downs. Hopefully you'll see from the published summary minutes of the meetings, that's the level of detail that we go to in the meeting.
Thank you, Tracy.
I don't think I'm on. Shall I just shout, Chair? I'm not known for having a particularly quiet voice.
That's the right one.
There you go. Thanks very much for that, John. John, in paragraph 71, you're talking about a community conversation in Shrewsbury, which is quite, you know, pertinent for today. And I know, if I think back, you were very keen to push the community charter about getting PCSOs and police officers out to parish meetings. And I've been up on Monday night. I was at the Wyre Forest annual parish meeting where they came, and which is a tick. They'd all said that they'd either had officers at their meetings, not all of their meetings, but certainly they'd been to at least one meeting that year, or they'd all put reports in. I just wondered if you've got any idea if that's still continuing and if that rolls out across West Mercia. I seem to be on both now, sorry. Thank you.
So the community charter is just being refreshed and will be republished. Now, as Councillor Parry's point made earlier around my visit to Ludlow Town Council was started with an admonishment from the mayor to the inspector that was present, which is which is a matter for them. Yet, ironically, with the same inspector at Bridgenorth a month or so before, there was a clear relationship there in terms of some regular attendance and the like. So the answer is it's not consistently providing the results as yet. But I believe things like charters are important because it sets the standard. Because where it didn't happen, that you're able to go back to the force to say you committed to going here once a quarter, and it's obviously not happening. And because my view is exactly the one that you described about your experience is that it's often not the work in the meeting; it's a relationship that happens as a result. And one of the strands within my police and crime plan, the new one, is around policing with our communities, is exactly that. When I use feedback from things like community conversations in Shrewsbury, the ask of the community isn't overly difficult and complex, and they're incredibly forgiving and supportive of the policing mission. And yet at the same time, too often we are disappointing them. And so therefore, in places like Shrewsbury and others where that spike in shoplifting rose quickly and is coming down the other side, just to reassure from the statistics, that damage to the confidence in the meantime is not what I want to see. I want to see police embedded in our community, dealing with those things as they arise, and that will only come from the relationship type approach that we see in the community charter. Now, that is in the gift of the Chief Constable, like performance reports, but it doesn't mean that there isn't the will to do that. I just have to support them in doing it more consistently, and where it isn't happening, make sure it's fixed quickly as well.
If I press the right button, it works. It's amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you for that, John. And I'm really pleased to see that A, the community charter is being refreshed and that you're holding the force to account on it, because it is, I know it's perhaps something that the force would sometimes question how much time it would take to do that. But actually, if you want to police with consent, people have got to, see their local police officers and be able to talk to them. So just really glad that you're still holding the force to account on that, right?
Thank you, Viv. You had something?
Just a quick one. Call handling. Nationally, Westminster Mercia is 39 out of 44. It says here. Per 999 calls 10 seconds. The average time of 101 calls has decreased from 26 seconds. What is it decrease from? Where is that information? Could you just finish it off? What does it decrease from? And the other thing, I was very sad to see that the staff, they've got quite a lot of sickness in officer sickness, and the stress that they must be under is tremendous. They do work very hard.
Good evening, Councillor Parry. I didn't quite pick up the nuance of the call centre question. I think you're referring to.
It says.
Let me have a
it
look.
Decreased by 26 seconds. But what did it work? What did it decrease from?
So
what is it?
If I just check my clarification, so you're at paragraph 84D, are you? Am I just...
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So it's attempting to provide a summary of the late chart that's online, and on there it does show the over time. If I fast forward to the current performance, you will see that actually it's got worse since the way that this is described.
Right.
There is a problem with 101 in terms of the volume going through and the performance, but it's also exacerbated by a significantly and sustained higher level of 999 calls. The very latest data that has since been published outside of this in relation to our league table for 999, we have improved. Some of that is to do with the system change, but ultimately the latest figures show that we sit further up at the top of the bottom third rather than at the bottom of
I believe that the mayor did complain about that when you were there the other night. I was quite surprised she came out with as much as what she did, but she's quite right. People have decided that it's a waste of time ringing the police about anything because they just can't get through sometimes, and nobody comes. It takes ages for people to come to their houses, so what is the use of doing it if they're not going to get a police officer or something? It's going to be 2, 3 or 4 days, 5 days before you get a police officer comes anywhere near you.
I've had feedback from yourself around my answers to your questions aren't always helpful. I know some of your observation is your observation, but I think there is a central premise there which we as councillors and the public would have to maintain, that yes, at times the service won't be the one that we would hope and expect, and sometimes professional police officers will make judgments on things that they know that in fact we don't know and how we get responded to. But overall, in West Mercia, there is a level of response to people's concerns and reports of crimes that I think is acceptable. There are times when it falls below that, of course, but overall, we do have good responses. We are seeing things like burglaries drop. We do see things like shoplifting, including in Ludlow, despite go the right way. We do see crimes fall. But I do agree with your sentiment that that continued journey to ensure that those that are subject to that crime and the community around them are better informed around police activity does consistently need to get better. And as you would note from my police and crime plan, that is a central part of my focus as Commissioner.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And next you have Liz.
Thank you, Chair. If I could go back to my earlier question, if the Q2 figures are too recent for you to have done your own analysis, I'll revert to the Q1 figures, where rape in South Worcestershire was up 55%, which was considered statistically significant, I'm glad to see, in the way that the report was configured for public viewing. And domestic abuse in that area was up 4%. So what's going on in the South Worcestershire area?
Can I just have a moment to grab my notes from the A&A area? Yeah, no, I'm in there. It's just not. Yeah. That's the we're on the guest Wi-Fi, and when I load the page, it doesn't. It's not loading. It just looks. So I don't know if there's another area, and maybe it might load while we're talking, and I can maybe come back to it. If it doesn't, we can provide a fuller reply.
Well, I could also add then that the Q1 stats as far as victim satisfaction were trending in the same direction for domestic work for stalking, i.e. downwards, and that's a particularly prevalent downward direction from 82 to 72% in the South Worcestershire sub area, and from 92% to 77% in Herefordshire at Q1. So again, that is a 2-quarter downward trend of significant scale on these two victim satisfaction subjects. Again, could you comment?
So again, some of it I can't access, but the bits that I can access, there is some wider work around understanding satisfaction within West Mercia Police. So some of the areas that we're talking about here are particularly difficult to seek the views of those that are involved. So therefore, getting representative, and I know we've got ourselves in trouble earlier what's representative or not, but getting appropriate responses is particularly difficult. As part of the meeting, we discussed how that the bit that I can access it is done, and I'm summarising here. Some of that is around ensuring that we are using and commission services that are supporting those that are victim to capture that feedback and ensuring that it is being fed back, i.e. What has driven satisfaction or confidence or not. And I don't think that has been as well has been done as well as possible. Also, the work of the Forces Victim and Satisfaction Board in terms of how that is also driving satisfaction in this particularly difficult area of work where the actual volume of satisfaction figures isn't where we would want it to be. Because I think, and I don't know whether it's where your question is driving, there is an overall concern that despite what the figures are showing, there is still a large number of unreported incidents that are represented in this area, about giving confidence to those that might have been subject to this to be able to step forward and have the confidence in the service that they would receive. As I say, the other bit I can't access because it's not open.
Commissioner, are you going to provide a written response to that, which you can't find access to at the moment?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we could all have it, I would be obliged. I want to refer back to 84D as well. The thing, there's a practice in place called running law, with having a domestic violence specialist within the call centre. Are you considering that within your plans? Because I can't do it in the report.
We've seen a huge focus on domestic abuse, and indeed specialist advice in West Mercia have been around for a while in terms of in the control centre. There is also wider training for those doing the calls themselves, i.e. not just relying on specialist advisors in the room. There has been a more focus over a long period of time around getting vulnerability training full stop for staff, but also more specialist vulnerability specialists in the room. But that is around DA, yes, but also around vulnerability over mental health and other issues that present themselves at the front door.
Thank you. That would seem to me to be a reassurance factor that things are looking forward and looking up. But thank you for the commentary. Yeah.
Thank you. Some of these questions that are being raised are around performance and the indicators that you have to date. Just wanted to bring us back to the paragraph 65 to 67. The budget predicted a change from 288 to 290. But then in the next paragraph, it says how the planned overspend is seen as 3.8 million. So there's a bit of a discrepancy between your numbers there. Yeah. I'm interested in the first point about how much of that 3.8 million is attributable to the 4.75% pay award. But on top of that, I'm interested in what you've done to identify and mitigate the potential unintended consequences of that, to give yourself the assurance that this is an appropriate point of action, if not already identified as a way of reducing your underspend before the 4.75% pay increase. Thank you.
So I'm pretty certain the discrepancy between the two is around the use of reserves, but while I'm talking, Gareth will correct me or not. I think the number of your question is whether or not the force of the action the action the force is taking to get with it back in the budget is the right one in line with my plan. Have I got that as the right question?
Yes, it says in here about how you've got a number of measures, but you've only identified the one about restricting overtime and not fulfilling backfilling the vacancy.
So the reason why we identify those is because the vacant post bit is the biggest contribution to that in monetary terms. It's also targeted as well. So we've talked earlier consistently about the control room today. For example, that's not included within that. So if there's a vacancy within the control room, they would be recruited. I would suggest this is one of the more difficult areas. We every year look at the savings plan over as part of setting the budget, and there's always difficult questions in there. Well, this is a whole other set of things on top of that. You'll find a lot of delay in how we've made that work, i.e. profiling the way we're spending it, i.e. it's not spending the money ever, it's just delaying it onwards, and that's why my raising of concern earlier around the impact of the NI changes and pay rise full cost is starting to cause me concern. Let's say, for example, they decide to fund the NI and the pay rise full costs in next year in our budget. Great tick, isn't it? But unfortunately, they currently distribute police funding from the centre around something called NRE, as in they share it out on a formula. Unfortunately, our spend isn't in line with that formula, so therefore we will be a loser as a result. So my concern is, even in the best case scenario where they say they're fully funding it, our share of it actually doesn't represent under the current formula. It's not a political point, but I suppose it is. The last government, this government have all talked about changing that funding formula to be more fair and representative. Nobody, I don't think, is ever actually going to do it. So therefore, we are likely to lose out.
As you say, it's not isolated to just West Mercia, so I'm interested to see if you've got any plans or you already have engaged with other forces to see how they're coping with it.
So one of the areas that we, of course, look at is things like procurement. So one of the expensive areas where I pick one is training new police officers and how they go through their different entry routes. We collaborate, it was with West Mids, Staffordshire and Warwickshire. West Mids have taken their own route, but we now still collaborate with those other three forces and getting the value out, for example. Uniform, vehicles, IT, all those kind of things are all either done collaboratively or through framework, sector driven, or indeed partner driven. Because I do believe in efficiency. It's not very exciting, but it is really important. And I worry, again, it may sound a slightly political question, but I listened to the budget announcement. I've seen what they published. There's a manifesto commitment around police officers and PCSOs. And I worry that how that gets delivered, because there's a lot of talk about will be delivered through efficiencies in policing. Now, if there are areas that we're not yet trialling or need some legislative support to help enable, great, I'm very happy and we can divert funding, but I've not yet started to see some of those routes, because if there's an expectation that I grow my PCSO and officer numbers on the efficiency that I'm already having to use to offset the other cost pressures, then it's not going to stack up, is it? That I talked earlier about the portion of my budget that I get to make the saving from. It's going to get even smaller as a result. Yeah. Thank you. John. Sorry, Gareth.
You want to say something again? Yes, please. Just a brief addendum to John's answer in terms of you asked about learning from others. We have a get together every year with chief executives and treasurers and CFOs from across the PCC landscape, and it was quite stark this year to see that the information they presented around universally, pretty much across the country, forces and PCCs as a result are moving financially higher risk, lower resilience. It is a pattern across the board. There are basically no exceptions where assets are being sweated harder and reserves have been reduced over a period of a number of years. So we are not seeing different challenges to other forces, and we are looking at what others are doing, but it's a pretty universal picture.
Just that, if you could make sure that that's captured in the budget information that is presented later on in the year, that would be useful.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Back in February, I remember introducing this issue of cybercrime, and at the last September meeting, again, we didn't get any further information on it. And if you look at the minutes, you were going to provide some overview of the issue at this next meeting, which is now, but I don't see any cybercrime overview. And I don't know, I mean, we've been going on at this since February and still haven't got any further information on any movement on that. Could you tell us where we are with it?
It's about, if we're not meeting the requirements, then maybe an explicit agenda item in and around cyber, if that's what it would take to do it. We can happily do that. Hopefully be shown on the next agenda item with Vaughan, for example, working with the panel members around what that terms of reference would look like, and hopefully accommodating where we're able to do that. If it takes a particular approach around cybercrime, if we're not currently meeting it, happily do that.
Thank you, Commissioners. Are there any further questions relating to agenda item 6? No? Right, thank you for that. We move on to agenda item 7. The violence against women and girls, stalking and harassment. And the members of the panel are invited to consider this report. Do I have a question or on this?
Is he going to introduce it?
Oh, I do beg your pardon, again, I do apologise. Would you mind introducing it?
Always welcome the opportunity to hear the sound of my own voice. So particularly grateful for the engagement from Councillor Harvey around looking at some of the terms of reference. The idea is the paper we provided is a discussion paper. It's never going to be the complete landscape. We tried to pick up some of the areas. I would hope the subsequent conversation and questioning is around then how we inform future activity and others. But I'm very, as I say, grateful for the engagement, and I think it's a useful way of getting papers on the agenda. And whilst we haven't, I don't think we have to address everything. It has enabled that perhaps more considered area where the panel are interested. I'm happy to take any questions or follow the discussion elsewhere. The panel sees it.
Thank you, Commissioner. My apologies again. Any questions?
Yep. Yeah, thank you, John. Obviously, it's a fairly sound indictment when you read that survivors say they do not wholly believe West Mercia provides a good service overall and are unlikely to report sexual offending again. We must all be very, very concerned to read that in any report. And then we see that domestic abuse performance sits at 8.6% against a target of 16%. So on both those measures, we seem to be a long way away from where we need to be, unless I'm misunderstood. I'm quite new here, so I may have misunderstood it completely. When I read sentences like that, I obviously am very concerned. So I'd like to comment on those and try to explain those and explain exactly where's the action plan coming from this, what measures, so I get a better understanding of why we are so far adrift to the target and why the survivors that we work with are so unlikely to report offending again.
So there's a number of very complex themes within the question you just answered, so I'm just going to pick some of them out. And hopefully you get a sense of, in the performance reports, there are elements of the things we're talking about here contained within there in terms of timeliness and all those kind of things. You also know that some of the things that victims will be dissatisfied about are outside of the police's control. I know a sexual violence case in this county over 5 years. The number of continuances, hearings, all those kind of things, I think are an embarrassment to society. And that's not an isolated case. So the ability to get justice for somebody of a terrible thing that's happened, I don't think the system is set up to succeed currently. And when we see Crown Court backlogs, for example, getting longer, not shorter, then that's not a sign of the problem. The problem is being fixed. But the police's element, the bit that I've got the control over, is relentlessly around the investigative quality, but also the quality of the service that the person feels they're getting. Because in some instances, and let's be clear about this, some instances the justice that they want has to override a need sometimes for justice through the court. So that sense of them being dealt with justly and appropriately and considered is really, I think, the right approach. The target you refer to is one that we are striving to. All targets should stretch. It's not. It is. If everybody looks at the outcomes, you will see the same thing. I think when we look at even outcomes that are the targets we're meeting, I think in the grand scheme of things, that's still not a great. These are often well less than 2 out of every 10 being given that outcome. Because I think what we do need to do, and it's not around the most serious of incidences, but more things in society, we need a different route of what that punishment and outcome is. Because Short-term prison sentences, for example, are very expensive and don't work, i.e. they don't get that probation input. We also need to look as to how called out of court disposals or other routes of delivering justice that has the support of victims, including restorative justice. We need to change because we won't succeed in the current framework. But what we can do, having given the doom and gloom, is we can definitely do better than we are now, and the targets within the performance reports and the description are definitely achievable. We just need consistent focus across the course area to ensure that they are achieved.
Any action plan?
So there is a VORG action plan. There is, of course, action plans following the forces engage around stuff like SOCT, which has vulnerability, which has some of these issues in them as well. It features in the performance drive within West Mercia Police. So there isn't an explicit. This is the around this particular one element of it. There is the overall focus to improving. I have the confidence that it has the organisation's attention. I don't yet have the confidence that we are in the place that it needs to be. And some of that, I think, Councillor Kerr, is around how the organisation sets itself up. There is organisational activity dispersed across the geography. Some of that activity is quite specialised, so therefore that specialism is quite spread out. And some of the work that the current Chief Constable is doing is looking at the model, particularly around how that more specialist work is brigaded to ensure that we can improve the effectiveness of it, and it will be subject to an updated panel in due course.
We have a copy of the vows. If there's an action plan for can we just have a copy?
I'm sure it's published.
Yeah, we'll ask as a
That was a national
action
plan.
plan. Thank you. It's
I was going to ask the same question, but I've also got other different things. And I really agree with everything that you've got in here. It's just that it's skinny. We've never really had a really bigger report. Ensure victims of serious sexual offences are constantly our highest standard of service. Putting crime, police within the community, supporting victims and witnesses, maximising resources and value for money. And on the other pages, what survivors and their families say. I don't think I've seen it very much of what you said, all the things you can do, but there's not been this report yet. And this is, I think, what we're all waiting for. We want a proper report. I personally think that I put down here, survivors in the main feel that they will not be believed. That's dreadful. And they do not wholly believe that the West Mercia provide a good service overall, and they are unlikely to report sexual offending again. And if you're going to improve the landscape, how long is this going to take? Come on. We need to do more than just talk about it. We need to get on with it. And I'm sorry to that. And I know you work really hard. I'm not saying you don't, but you really need to. You're saying all these things. Come on, we need to have this report. Thank you.
So, your opinion is absolutely valid if that's your opinion, but I don't agree with what you just asserted.
I've told you what it says.
So the respectful element is for me to have my say while you had your say. I was just Councillor Parry. This report came from one of the panel members' focus around it. We've attempted to address the terms of reference around that, but also the view that this is an area that I don't think West Mercia Police does well. It's not a coming here with rolling something in glitter and presenting it as a success. This is a societal problem to which West Mercia Police is playing, and I am playing our part in addressing. And the point of the paper, and I didn't design it, I helped support the process that did, to help support the panel in its work, Now, one of the areas I would suggest to you of this panel's work, or I'd be so impertinent to suggest maybe where your focus would be, if you clearly identify to me in a cognizant and coherent way as to the bits that are missing, we will happily try and address it. One thing I would suggest isn't helpful is that we just need to do better, because I can reassure you that's already landed. Because I spend a lot of time as Commissioner talking to victims who've been let down. I spend a lot of time talking to communities who might not have confidence. I spend a lot of time talking to those working the system that doesn't feel that it is supporting those that we want to support. Therefore, hopefully in the paper, you will see me articulate the challenges, some of the work that is being done, some of the things that's not going well and that we might not have a plan for. But if there are areas to which we're missing, or indeed need to focus on further, we'll happily hear them. I don't claim to have the answers. What I do know is that this does have to get better. There is some nuggets, I think, of confidence that we can take, but they're exactly that. I want to get good, solid foundations that can mean that we can ably articulate those that do have experience of a great service and recommend and have confidence in the police. But I also know that's not where we are currently.
So you think this is all right that the survivors and their families say they are not wholly believed by the West Mercia Police, and they don't think they provide a good service overall. They are unlikely to report sexual offending again. That's terrible.
But can we, what I'm going to propose an action is that the report that you spoke of earlier has been given to us, be considered by us with a view to taking it further.
Yes,
So then we'll be talking.
that's all we're asking.
No, I understand that. What we're looking at is getting the facts around what we're thinking, because it's the only way we're going to go forward.
Yes.
Thank you, James.
So, sorry, Chairman, I just suggested that I might believe something. So if Councillor Parry listened to what I said in the answer to her question, she would know that's not the case. And to assert something that you just heard to not be the case, I would suggest is disingenuous at best. So therefore, I would suggest Councillor Parry reads the report.
I've read it.
You surprised me, if I'm honest, not from the
I've
nature
read
of your contribution.
I said again.
But I would suggest to you that I'm interested in the areas that we are missing, not broad brush statements around letting down and others, because I find it wholly offensive that there would be any suggestion that I think that the level of service that's outlined in here where people are let down is good enough, because I don't. And if you'd have listened to me, I said that in answer to your question, I don't think it's good enough. So therefore, part of the paper is how we improve it. And what I've not heard from you is those areas that you think we need to focus around how we drive that improvement, coming back to the panel's principal duty to scrutinise, tick, but also support me in my work as Commissioner.
Can I just come back 2 minutes? I have just brought subjects up that are in here that I am worried about.
Yeah, well, okay.
And as a person from Shropshire, and I have another officer person here and another one over, 2 people over here. We are concerned about Shropshire, I know, but there are other places. This is a big area that he's trying to support. We want some answers. We need this report.
Right, thank you. That's what I was going to say. Was an action point of sending to an action plan has been agreed.
Yeah.
I think we're not progressing any further here with the way that we're picking off each other, as it were. So what I would suggest.
Sorry about that.
No apologies. It's important to you, and as is this report, it's a very welcome report going forward. But we need to do it in a logical fashion.
Thank you.
So, James, should I look to you?
Yeah, thanks very much. Commissioner, this point has been alluded to by previous questions, but there's a little bit I'd be grateful if we could tease out. The report makes reference to, and I know you're committed to this, increasing confidence and trust in the criminal justice system. And you've also drawn attention to the fact that there are elements within the criminal justice system that are outside of your personal control. How do we improve the connectivity of this so that people, when we come to the interface between the police and all the other elements, those who've been victims of very serious crimes, you know, do actually feel that the thing has some coherence. Because I think it's at that interface that where some of the problems really manifest themselves.
So, first of all, it's recognition that these crimes are never in isolation. It's very rarely that there is just one. It's just one thing in society, i.e., the person that goes on to commit a serious sexual assault potentially could have either life challenges currently, or indeed, they've been themselves a victim of crime and others. The thing in isolation is not the problem, and it in no way excuses all those other things of that behaviour, because it's exactly what it is. But the recognising from the system that today's work of children's services in Shropshire will affect the rates of offending and the nature of offending in the future. It's how we join up some of that, and that's a societal problem. Parking that for a second, I think the central point of your question through the local criminal justice board. So the last government were just in the process to try and get local criminal justice boards on a formal statutory footing, because at the moment they are coming together, and I don't know how to say it politely, but other partners who aren't statutory members, they are just an invitee, can ignore, i.e. they don't have to engage meaningfully. And as commissioner, I chair here in West Mercia. It's very hard to get traction around some of the important issues, whether it be specialist or particular circumstances for those appearing as a witness that's supportive of that person to be able to give their evidence so that they can get the justice contained, whereas actually they might not be able to do that in open court, all the way through to the availability of courts for them to sit in. All those things are really difficult to get the traction around. So getting some statutory, I always hate the last government was particularly keen on that duty to collaborate, wasn't it, phraseology, but the sentiment underneath it is there's an expectation, you're statutorily required to show how you're working together. And I don't think in the criminal justice system we have yet got that, because we need independent justice, don't we, i.e. the person sitting in judgment needs to be independent, but the system underneath it needs to be about driving justice, and I don't think it is joining up. There is also, very last on a complex area, is around joining up the administration of it all. So the administration of the courts, the administration of victims and witnesses, the administration of how we move cases around between the different parts of the system. There is too much silo, there is too much different systems that don't talk to other systems. So simplifying and some individual owning more of the system, as in the organisation of the system, I think would be at the centre of it. Because I come back earlier to the point around that my example in Shropshire, 5 years. You've got to have some quite amazing resilience to take through 5 years alone, let alone the trauma of the incident that's happened underneath that. And I think the system can be more efficient in processing, let alone the outcomes that they deliver. I think is at the centre of this. And it does come from focus like obsteteria that's referred within there, which is a central-led focus on serious sexual violence. But there are only ticks on the dial. I think this particular area of crime needs a good boost so that we can have confidence in the system, because I want somebody who is the victim tomorrow to be able to have confidence that they will get justice, and they don't in the current system.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of points, but first of all, I'd like to query with you, Chair. I am aware, because I've been copied in on some of the correspondence, that this committee has received a number of questions from members of the public on this subject. Now, it appears that, well, we haven't we haven't surfaced those questions or had them read out and acknowledged publicly that we've received them, even if we're not in a position to be able to, even if the people asking the questions are not been able to attend in person. The submission of written questions to us as a panel is something that people are allowed to do, and we ought to be clear in terms of how we handle them and whether or not we are simply going to ask for a written reply. But I think we should have some way of actually acknowledging that those questions have been received and asking them or reading them in the room, even if we are not going to pursue them in terms of the panel's line of questioning, which I would be disappointed with. So I'd like to hear from you how we're handling these today, and at what point in the meeting, seeing as it wasn't covered under public participation at the front end of the meeting, we're going to deal with these.
Right. We're dealing with, my intention was to deal with the question at the end of the debate today. We've only got one question that I'm aware of.
I think one of the questioners was going to contact one of the councillors directly. I thought it might be you, Councillor Harvey, to ask her questions on her behalf. The chairman had also said that he was going to pick up a question, and that was the way it was going to be dealt with. Public participation is usually predicated on a member of the public attending the meeting to ask their questions, hence why they made contact with yourselves as councillors to pick up their questions for them. And I think that's the route the chairman was happy with.
I've got an email here from the team, as it were, and it specifically says that the person is not able to attend the panel, so just asking you to raise the matter. If that's incorrect, then I apologise, but as you haven't raised it, I was going to give the question at the end of the debate.
Okay, well, that's not how I'm used to things happening in Herefordshire. Obviously, this is a panel that covers multiple authorities. I think one of the reasons why we probably don't have greater public participation in the work of this panel is because there's no link between the panel web pages and the committee agendas that actually make it easy for the public to even be aware that we are sitting as a panel and what it is we're talking about. And I'm hoping that that can be resolved in terms of the online presence of this committee. I am happy to ask those questions if you're happy to give me the airtime to do it, because I have quite a few.
Okay, well, if I could just stop you there. How effective is our distributions of local authority?
Are you on that? Sorry, were you talking about the website?
The website.
I think Councillor Harvey has picked up a glitch. The Worcestershire website has been migrated to a new forum, and I think one of the links has not been working, which we will obviously address as soon as the meeting is finished. And there is information on there about members of the public and how they can participate, but we'll look to make that more prominent to make it easier for members of the public. But we'll take on board what Councillor Harvey has said to us.
Thank you. So is it the glitch you picked up, Councillor?
Well, that's one thing, but I think not requiring members of the public to attend in person in order for their questions to be asked, I think is a little constraining, particularly when lots of people work for a living and we meet during the day.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is consider how the constitution works for us, for the better term. So that's something we can look at. They are coming on things, but I would welcome you raising the questions that you have got, giving you the airtime, as you say. If you don't raise the one I've got, I will certainly raise it. So, up to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, in that case, the first question has been submitted by the Herefordshire Women's Equality Group. And it says West Mercia Police's performance statistics are concerning locally and nationally. on the prevention of violence and crime against women and girls, despite violence against women and girls being a police strategy priority. The charging and conviction rates for rape and assault are low, with dropout rates for victims worryingly high, and the process taking far too long to come to a resolution. Performance with respect to domestic abuse continues to be low and has reached only half the force's own target of 16%. And there has been a worrying increase in the incidence reporting of stalking and harassment over the past year. How does the Police and Crime Commissioner explain this poor performance, and how do you propose to improve it?
So it is the premise of the question I agree with, and if we look at the most recent figures, we see an outcome rate for rape for West Mercia around the 12%. But you look at the over a period of time, it's not a great figure, full stop, no matter whether it's up slightly or not. It's also, when we look at as a region, we have good performance in relation to success through the courts in terms of cases getting to court and indeed coming out the other side. The charge rate is also fairly good. But we're in comparison to other areas rather than, I think, what I would describe as good. So the premise of the question I agree with. I think our performance and the regional performance in light of others is not as the question would describe, but it's not something to crow about because the figures themselves are not great. But when we look at I look at our regional compared to others, it is better.
I think on an absolute scale, the situation nationally is very worrying. This is a very serious national issue. And, I personally recognise that. And I think as a panel, it is helpful for us to try and find how to do things better and support you in doing that and challenge you on the success you're having in delivering on that, whilst recognising that, although it might be a terrible picture equally in other areas and nationally, we want things to be better in our area, not independent of that, but irrespective of that. I have a couple of questions from Councillor Toynbee, who is the chair of who's the leader of the Green Group in Herefordshire. She asks, what proportion of West Mercia officers have received specialised training in handling male violence against women and girls, and what is the force doing to tackle the potential waste of time and resources in dealing with this issue as a consequence of the extremely fragmented landscape of funding to tackle violence against women and girls? And can you give some examples of work being done to reduce the number of victims who are retracting their complaints or dropping out from the system?
So I'm trying to on behalf of the force who we get. So this is my view as commissioner. So frontline staff are committed to have training around all areas of vulnerability, particularly around gender-based violence. That's their commitment. As to the level, as it were, I can't give you the exact answer. I agree in relation to the fragmented area of support afterwards, in terms of whether it be the MOJ funding, whether it be my funding, whether it be funding that comes through councils. Hence why I work with as many of those people as possible to try and coordinate some of that. For example, in Worcestershire, I joint commission that support with the council, etc. So I play my part in trying to reduce it. Forgive me, there's another part that has just gone into my mind of the question that I haven't answered.
There was training, there was the fragmented landscape, and there was the dropout rate.
sorry, the dropout rate. In terms of, we look at there's something called outcome 16. So outcome 16 is one of the outcome codes. This is where the victim no longer supports prosecution. And one of the reasons we look at that is where it is disproportionately represented in certain crime types. And this particular area, it is represented. For example, I know that where there is a DA involved, and that is still an outcome, that therefore there is a lot of scrutiny from the force. So there is heightened scrutiny, but there is disproportionality in how that outcome code is used, which is overly disproportionate in VOG offences.
Thank you. I've got a question here from Councillor Fagan, who's the chair of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee in Herefordshire. She asks, given the high rate of police call-outs for violence and sexual offences in rural Herefordshire and in Hereford City, alongside weak public confidence in reporting sexual crimes, how will West Mercia Police prioritise resources for tackling sexual violence and domestic abuse specifically? And given the scale and urgency of the problem, how will it work with partners to support affected families, ensure timely early advice, and help shift the culture that impacts women, girls, and family life in Herefordshire and more broadly across the force area?
So I alluded earlier, there is some model work going on in terms of how the organisation is developed, to which that has a focus and will feature when I present the outcome of some of that work. One thing I would add in terms of building confidence, one of the areas is how the organisation deals with those within its organisation that may be perpetrating some of this behaviour. So having that clarity that when somebody it may be perpetrating that behaviour, and let's be clear, we're talking predominantly about men against women, aren't we? That the organisation takes the appropriate action and indeed routes it from the organisation and reassures the public that it has done so. If you, hopefully the public can have the greater confidence of all the cases that get publicised, when these things are actively sought out and detected within the ranks of West Mercia and then dealt with, that helps build the confidence of the public in the organisation, that it then has to have confidence in going to with these issues.
Thank you. I also made some inquiries internal to my authority about the work that's going on in commissioning services to support and address violence against women and girls, stalking and harassment, and have obviously it's important that councils and council services coordinate and work with the police and other third sector and other public service organisations to address this issue in a coherent fashion. And it's good to see in your report that you handled today that you had a meeting in December last year about coordinating and looking specifically and in detail at actions taken to address violence against women and girls, and that is a coordinated piece of work with partners that has been an initiative that's been ongoing. And I recognise that in the context of that as an initiative, it's early days. Personally, I was a little disappointed that, you know, the report mentions the 6-week review of progress that is being made on that initiative, but doesn't include any performance measures or statistics or detail about how that work is going in terms of sharing that with the panel. And maybe you could comment on why that wasn't part of the report that came to us. But the comments from our officers are in the context of the partnership working. It would be good to hear of projects and interventions that police know about, locally or nationally, that have had success in addressing this as a problem, and how that that best practice and learning is being wound into that partnership working. And a comment on the way that the statistics and performance measures are being reported. And I think this might be a more general comment across all the performance measures that might be helpful. Our officers are saying that it might be instructive in order to actually understand the situation on the ground, because the subforce areas are quite different in size and nature, that the rate per 100,000 population or per 10,000 population, whatever makes a sensible balancing figure, would be more helpful as a benchmarking than percentages or looking at raw incidence figures for the sub-force areas. That would sort of balance things out a little bit, because some areas of the force are more densely populated than others. It would help put the information in context.
So I don't know whether or not we can share the bit at the beginning of your question around, I don't see why not, but we'll check to see whether or not we can do it with the panel. Imagine. I don't know why, but I don't know why we wouldn't be able to, but we'll double check and we'll share it. In relation to the general point around best practice, which is the end part of what you were just describing, I think things like Opsiteria exist because there isn't best practice, in terms of there isn't that universally accepted, this is the way it should be done and this is the model that should be replicated. So things like Opsiteria will hopefully help try and get some of that greater amount of best practice and then proliferated. I host within my office a sexual violence coordinator, joint funded with the health service, and it's posts like that that do help do some of the legwork for that coordination, because we come back to things like Drive, this domestic abuse perpetrator program, high risk, is everywhere in West Mercia now, as are multi-threat risk perpetrator programs for domestic abuse. But that's only a drop in the ocean, isn't it, of actually what we're talking about here in terms of many masculinities, positive relationships, all those bits and pieces. I'm really proud I'm the only area in England and Wales that's got multi-level domestic abuse perpetrators. Quite embarrassing I'm the only one, isn't it? But I'm the only one thus far. I want to be the area where we've got multi-level interventions for whole rafts of perpetrators of the area that we're talking about here. So using things like my sexual violence coordinator to help engender the coordination of that, really grateful to you. So I can't do it on my own. So I need education to do some of it, don't I? I need health to do some of it. We need to do some of it. And there is more that can be drawn up. And my fear is, as budgets constrain, we will see a bit more silo thinking. But I want to make sure that we don't. So you will see the continuation of some of those coordination posts within my office to help drive those through. But as I said at the beginning, hopefully we'll find out why if we can't, and if we can, we'll share with you the fortunate version.
And the measures per head of population, or 10,000 or 100,000.
Sorry, forgive me, I've forgotten the bit around the relevant bit.
Sorry, the suggestion from officers was that because there are different densities of population in the different sub-force areas, that in order to put the incidents, the crime incidents in context, it might be helpful to represent the figures per 10,000 or 100,000 of population, which would put all of the statistics on a level playing field.
I admitted earlier I'm not a statistic expert, but I think I get the point you're making, and if we can represent it like that, because what you're trying to show is a hotspot, aren't you? I.e., where it's disproportionately there in a certain geography.
Can I come back?
Yep.
I think the data in question is not our data, so we will have to see if we can draw on resource and force to make that happen. So we will obviously ask the question, but we can't see it promising today.
Thank you. And I think I've got to the end of other people's questions, and I've got I've got one of my own, Chair,
While you're on a roll,
if I may.
while you're on a roll,
I haven't taken up all of the oxygen in the room yet, so
you'll get in there.
I'm close on it, I realise.
Would anybody mind if I just open this door slightly?
So get some oxygen in.
Yeah.
Looking at, again, not to put you on the spot about Q2 figures, but reverting to the Q1 data, there was a 10% increase in harassment and stalking in the force area in Q1, and violence against women and girls in the subcategory of sexual assault. We have a 34% increase as at April this year, compared to the January 2019 to December 2019 baseline. And that was higher than the most similar group and national figures there. And we've only seen a 2% decrease in rape cases across the force area since 2019, as at April 24. So that's kind of the context for the current initiative. But I'm wondering if there is any commentary that you can provide in terms of the current force landscape on this as an issue, which is particularly driving some of these significant increases in sexual assault cases, and the problems, as we've already highlighted in the performance topic that we covered previously, in the South Worcestershire area specifically.
So the more recent figures, and in the paper that you've only just very recently had, does show our position against our MSG and against nationally, and we are either beneath or in line from my recollection. But there is your central question is how we improve the service to those there, i.e. if there's under reporting to give confidence, and those that are reporting to have satisfaction, I think. So the first part is around the front door. So how they're being dealt with as it comes through the front door, is in the issue being recognised and the appropriate response, and then the appropriate response being an appropriate investigation of a high quality and the right referral to victim services if need be. And so therefore we do that in a number of ways, including from the back end, me commissioning the right services, through to scrutiny to ensure that the right referrals are being made, and then that wider investment in investigative quality to ensure that those who do require something to be investigated do get the right response, because some of the legislation is fairly niche and not commonly used by lots of officers. Other is much more common. So therefore, ensuring that the level of knowledge and expertise and specialism is there to support when necessary, also important, and that feeds into some of the model changes that I alluded to earlier.
If I could come back on my question. You're confusing me now by hopping between Q1 and Q2 figures. I mean, I'm happy to talk about Q2 figures on this. We've got violence against women and girls, sexual assault. It was 34% increase in Q1. It's 30
Q2 because that's something
that's
happening.
The police and crime commissioner was referring to Q2
you want to know that information, I would suggest, and we're going to have an additional meeting to discuss Q2, if you remember at the beginning of that briefing.
Sorry. I can talk about Q2. It's not that we can't talk about it. I might not just have all the answers of my concern.
Well, I'd just like to highlight in that case the 79% increase in the overall volume of stalking and harassment as at July 2024 that are showing in the Q2 figures, and this is across the force area. And I support the initiative that's on the go at the moment. I recognise that it might be early days. I think Personally, I'm really concerned about the figures here, about the feedback you're getting from survivors in terms of their experience going through the process, as picked up by other members of the panel. And if this is an early initiative, early days in this initiative, Chair, I'd like to suggest that maybe this panel takes a longitudinal interest in violence against women and girls, and maybe plans to come back to it at some future point in the work programme.
Your request is noted, and I will refer to it at the end of the debate. Is there anybody else who has something to say regarding this agenda item 7? Okay, let me sum up, if I may. And if you don't agree with me, please say so. We have all the questions that Liz referred to. In fact, I had 2 of them in paper. I was going to bring forth. I would encourage, I'm disappointed that people may not feel they're able to communicate with us directly. But what I would ask is that all panel members, if you receive a question, if you receive a presentation, whatever, please let us know, let the team know, because we may not get it. And I want to address everything we get in from all members of the public, because it's vital to the public understand that we will take on board their concerns. Now, action points from my point of view is: 1, we're going to find out whether the public can attend in a Teams meeting in the digital format, if that's permissible. 2, Commissioner, you're going to provide an action plan going forward. The current, I've got a few bullet points there, just the guidance, so I won't give you topics to deal with, but I'd like to do something around the current situation in detail. The action plan going forward to address those matters. The engagement with your engagement with the PC, your office, and the partnering agencies, including responding how you are responding to victims, survivors. What's the plan for that? After that, as I say, that is not set in stone. If you want to go further, then fine. This is a very important matter. And finally, from me, I'd like to thank the questions coming forward, because we do need, it does need to be addressed. I know nationally it's an issue, of course locally it's an issue, needs to be addressed. So if we can have that, then after we've got the next action plan from the Commissioner, then perhaps we can start to look at in more detail what's going forward.
Yeah, sorry, just a small but I think very important point. In the feedback from victims and survivors, I understand it's a complex ecosystem and it's hard to interpret, but I do think it's not within your wit to actually break down and ask them whether they're satisfied with the police, whether they're satisfied with the court, whether they're satisfied with the various elements, and to seek to hear their views on it. I think we should be able to do that. That asks for that to be taken into account.
So, as I alluded earlier, Chairman, we're in fierce agreement, hence why, as part of the scrutiny work before, that refresh around victim satisfaction as to how that's captured. So that was my reference to using those supporting, i.e. ISVAs, IDVAs, using those professional workers as part of their work to support the victim to capture the satisfaction and make sure it is being used. There is a contention that the volume isn't high enough. I agree, but there isn't the contention that we're not capturing and analysing it, i.e. the data is not giving us enough meaningful volume-wise to be, I don't want to use a representative word again for the fear of using it wrongly, but to be able to use with confidence was a reference. Chairman, can I just have an ask in terms of, would you as a panel just write down what you read out to me in an email, just so that we understand exactly what it is we think the gap is?
Okay, the ask easily satisfied. Thank you.
Can I clarify something as well around the ask in terms of when we went through the terms of reference for this, we were quite careful, I think, in terms of making sure that the ask was within the remit of both the PCC and the panel in terms of the scrutiny on either police or partners, because obviously John scrutinised it, the PCC scrutinised the police, and holds the Chief Constable to account. But the partnership space is different, and I want to make sure that we're asking for things that we can provide back. So,
Thank you. What I was asking for there was how your action plans going forward, etc. And partnering agencies, what are the forms that you can envisage going forward? Commissioner said earlier about the time taken for court cases to come to fruition. And that's an important element, because you get 5 and 6 years between incident and justice. There is a problem there. And perhaps we can look right to the Home Secretary and make that point to them. It's getting late. Can we look at the agenda item 8? Sorry. You have something to say? This?
Yes, and hopefully it's in your interests, Chair. I would counsel caution in terms of jumping to a solution as far as handling members of the public's engagement with the panel in the context of doing things online. I think what we as a panel need to get clearer on offline from this meeting is how we handle public questions, and take some advice and provide some clarity to the public on that, rather than necessarily opening up hybrid or virtual meetings.
I wasn't offering a solution. I was merely offering a way forward that there can be a choice of how they attend. They can attend in person if they wish to. They can join by. Am I on the wrong?
It's that side of the
Yeah.
meeting before the public.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes.
My apologies. My apologies. Right, next item, agenda item 8, and it's gone 1 o'clock now. So if you want to get home, you must ask short questions. Make them brief, please. Road safety. Please.
Fair to say, Chairman, the biggest issue in my postbag consistently from day one to today, hopefully a overall update and similar before to be able to show some activity. I am just doing some further A&A work, and there is a consultation, as I've just alluded, an engagement process at the moment. It's live on my website until the 8th, looking at to hear lived experience of those in the community. But again, intended to be an update and to initiate hopefully some debate and areas of future focus and areas that maybe we're not focusing on at the moment that the members think we should be.
Thank you. Do we have any?
Just a quick one. I'm going to make it really quick.
All right.
Boy races I put down last night when I was going through this again. We have a terrible problem. It's awful. They race around the town late at night. We've also got young men that are doing road work on the cars in the road where people can't get past or on the pavements. I've reported it 2 or 3 times. Nothing's been done. I think it's wonderful about building this awareness of sessions in colleges and sixth forms, because that is a way to maybe stop it. And I put down who will do this. Is it going to be the police officers who have enough work to do at the moment? Or is it going to be somebody special who's going to stretch in to go to colleges and different things? And you've got a number of recommendations, it says, and you're commissioning work. And I think that's good. Please make this one of the recommendations, that we do something about these boy races. That one of them's going to be killed before long, or they're going to kill somebody else. Thank you.
I think education is one of the harder parts of this particular area of work. So I agree with you. We're working with the people who deliver the speed awareness course. I'm sure nobody here will have ever been on one. but that speed awareness course is around how you alter your behaviour to be safer and ultimately not come to the attention of the police. Street racing is an issue in different parts, and it's quite hard to police, but there are specialist police resources, including a specialist motorcycle team that we have in West Mercia. And where those problems do happen, they do tend to be more summer-based than winter-based. Where there is that problem, it should be identified by the locals and then using that force resource to target it. I know a colleague from Reddit, for example, will know that West Mids border, particularly where they have real problems with street racing and use some legislative abilities to use a court injunction. We see it come across the border particularly strongly and very hard to police. But where it happens, my expectation is the organisation use its auspices to respond to it. My only plea would be if there is educational opportunity, i.e. if there are clubs or other things in your area that do require some either support from West Mercia Police or some partnership funding around activity in this area space, always interested in that either via your local team or directly to myself as commissioner, because I don't know, whether there's a car clubs or whatever else in different areas that can help support some of this education, because just using people who deliver the speed awareness course to also do this kind of work is only one element of, I think, our response.
Thank you for that. Colin?
Thank you. My question or observation is to do with speeding. In my ward alone, the A442 passes through it from Kidderminster, which is obviously Worcestershire, Bridgnorth in Shropshire. I've lived in the area 49 years, and that stretch of road, which is approximately 17, 18 miles, has an average of 1 death per year. There's been 2 recent fatalities just on the edge of Bridgnorth in the last 3 months, and along with other collisions that regularly occur along it. I appreciate that setting speed limits and things like that is not in your gift, that is up to the local authority. But I was wondering if you can bring any pressure to bear on the local authorities to get some cooperation together to try and make speed awareness along that road by thinking somewhat outside of the box of what we could do to have that road in particular addressed as almost a road of death. Will you be the next fatality on this stretch of road? I've seen initiatives in France in years gone by where they put up on the scene of a fatality for some months afterwards, they erect a black board with an outline of a skeleton on it where there's been a fatality. And when people are driving along the road and they suddenly see a list of these boards having that, it rams it home much, much quicker than this is a 30 mile an hour, this is a 40 mile, or whatever the speed limit is. Is there any way that you can get some sort of initiatives to help local communities reduce this carnage? Sorry, I know it's a broad brush, but it's, we've got to stop it somewhere.
So road safety been pretty consistently in my police and crime plan since 16. We've seen death come down, but it's not come down as fast as it should do because the technology has helped enormously. Engineering, education, enforcement. I know the road that you referred to, I've driven through it today. I've been through the site at Quatford where that fatality was for the most cyclists. I'm 48 years old. That road's been a bad road since I've been able to drive for the last 30 odd years. Too much of it is around the way the roads are designed. So I feel a bit sorry for the highway authorities because they've got lots of roads and they cannot, I don't think, have got the resources to be able to make them and do the improvements that need to happen. So therefore, we do need the enforcement. And that site at Quatford, for example, is subject to enforcement, and it was subject to enforcement before that terrible fatality. So it's not working in the truest sense, is it? Because there was a fatality there. So me ratcheting it up enforcement is a possibility, and you've seen me just whack in a load more money this last year, more enforcement happening now. engineering is what it is in terms of the highway authorities doing their very best, but it is what it is. And so therefore that other gap is around education. So I want to see that dial of education go up. And your point around partnership is, and you'll see in the report, section 10, around the themes of my current scrutiny work with the forces, my contention is partnerships aren't being effective at the moment. They're effective at a very tactical level around an isolated site. They're not system based. And I don't think the police are necessarily playing their part, or the other statutory partners. And so following that work, I'll understand what the Chief Constable comes back with, and I think there will be some further work with partners. In the olden days, when safety camera partnerships were established, there were partnerships between the local authorities and the police and others, weren't they? And they used to share resources and alike. It changed, it's just a police activity now, and I think the partnership working underneath that has gone. So I think, and I'm guessing here, one of the outcomes of this will be a strategy as to how that strategic partnership work gets reinvigorated, because the things we talked about today aren't in one person's gift, they're in multiple partners, and it's not being coordinated at the level that it should be.
Thank you. John.
Yeah. Right, thank you. Commissioner, on dash cam submissions, I had a report from a resident a couple of years back now, so it's not recent, that they found the experience quite difficult, and they attempted to upload their dash cam information, found that exceedingly difficult. And once I think they'd managed to do that, they found that the feedback from having done so was very poor, so they didn't understand what the outcome was, and so they thought the usefulness of doing this was not encouraging, and so the system that was in place at least a couple of years ago was really inadequate in order to encourage people to help, to assist in finding solutions to the likes of antisocial driving and so on. Do we have any understanding of how effective we are in getting dash cams, or a better way that we could do it to improve the outcomes, and could we get better feedback to those who actually upload their dash cam information, for instance? And so there's going to be a review of that dash cam to prevent, pursue, and protect the public. Can we actually get a hold of some information as to how effective this is?
Councillor Gallagher, I'm in the unfortunate position of not agreeing with you in terms of SNAP. It's one of the systems in policing that's actually fairly slick to be able to submit the report, the evidence, and the result. Now, the internet's not assisting me because I can't access my OneNote, which is the bit that provides me my papers. I've got the stats in there of what happens to the SNAP submissions, and we are up significantly. I'd love to be able to quote you the actual stats, but we're up significantly in terms of the number of submissions, the numbers that get, and all of them are reviewed by a police officer, the numbers that get reported around offences, the numbers that get education, the numbers that get words of advice, and the numbers that get no action are all set out. And actually, I was really pleased and impressed by actually the response to it. One thing we don't do, and I think there is a reason why, based in GDPR, I assume, is the feedback to the submitter isn't great, and that's universally accepted, I think, to not be great. But what West Mercia Police do is publicise the results in terms of, we've had X number of to the community and by neighbourhood matters results. So I think it's an area that works fairly well. It could always do more, of course it should, but it's not quite as been fed back to you. And the reason why we've given it a bit of attention is there are 3 million dash cam owners, I understand, in England and Wales. So there are great eyes and ears everywhere. So getting that footage submitted easily is really great. But is there some particular instances where it's not worked well? Happy to hear that, but it was contrary to how I understood it.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes. Please.
Thank you. clearly, the decent level of engagement that you've had with the public on this, with over 2,000 responses, indicates this is something that, you know, people can get their heads around. It is something that lots of people experience, both as pedestrians and cyclists, and also as drivers on the road. And it is something that you know, is of importance and captures the public attention. So it's good that we've got it on our agenda here today. In my county, there are quite a lot of communities who would be interested in having 20 mile an hour zones implemented, but there seems to be reticence from the authority as a highways authority in bringing some of these forward, where there is a query about whether enforcement is going, you know, enforcement is going to be supported by the police, and that seems to be a barrier somehow in terms of getting these areas approved. Now, I can see from the report that, you know, you're supportive of things like the speed indicator devices and that sort of thing. And lots of people who do speed don't do it deliberately. Most people, I don't think, do it deliberately, but they're not paying 100% attention to the limit that's in force exactly where they are. So the speed indicator devices with their smiley and grumpy faces are really helpful in helping people to help themselves in maintaining an appropriate speed for a particular set of road circumstances. And, you know, irrespective of whether the police are going to be in there with speed cameras and, you know, enforcement activities on a day-to-day basis, it does make a difference to the communities where those devices are installed. So could I ask for your view on 20 mile an hour zones and the degree to which the police's active consent or acceptance of the implied enforcement requirement to go alongside them is a deal breaker in having those reduced speed limits implemented in areas where communities want to see them happen. And I have an example in my area where a community speed watch initiative was requested, and the police actually turned down the request to allow the speed watch activity to be undertaken, because they said it was in a 30 mile an hour zone, and they said that the average speed of the vehicles that they were aware of was so high that it was actually dangerous for members of the public to be even on the pavement undertaking a community speed watch activity to acquire the evidence to support just quite how much speeding was going on in that area. And it just seems a nonsense. We go round and round in a circle. So any help that you can provide in supporting these sorts of initiatives coming forward at whatever level of enforcement the force can provide to back them up would be really appreciated. I'd welcome your thoughts.
Gareth is more proficient than me in a number of things, including working his computer. So he's got his answer to Councillor Gallagher, if I can, just very briefly, around the OpSnap statistics. So I had an update in August, and the last 6 months, so the rolling 6 months, they had 3,090 submissions via OpSnap, of which 1,447 of those were referred for prosecution courses, notices, or indeed court. Nearly 1,000 of them dealt with via a police visit or advice letters, and only 686 were no further action. And lots of reasons for that: either out of force area, no offence committed, poor quality footage, etc. And the overall stat, which I think shows that it kind of must be working, 80% of all submissions are dealt with through some form of positive outcome. So for me, the stats do back it up, but volume is absolutely can be better. Going back to your point around 20 mile an hour zones, I do support targeted 20 mile an hour zones. They are really useful. I don't believe in blanket 20 mile an hour zones. I believe in targeted ones. And the police, in terms of your view around what role they have, they get consulted by the Highway Authority, and their view has to be taken into consideration. I would suggest you any observation from the police generally around whether or not it would then feel like 20, because there are a number of engineering measures to make it feel like 20. Because the police's view generally, as I understand it, is changing the speed limit is fine, but it also has to encourage the driver to behave at the new limit, which doesn't happen enough of the times, because enforcement can't then fix it underneath, i.e. just sticking in a 20 and expecting the enforcement to alter the behaviour, because it won't. It will only alter it in that time. DFT guidance on this subject, if you ever suffer with lack of sleep or indeed not being able to sleep, I don't know which one it will do to you. It's always worth having a look at, because that should be the view. 20-mile-an-hour zones are expensive to put in engineering terms. There was a bit of a link then to community speed watch around how that then happens. I don't necessarily agree with your conclusion around the community speed watch wasn't appropriate because it wasn't safe for them to stand on the pavement. Yes, there will be some risk assessment, but I think it's a slightly different answer to that. If the speeds are so high, then it should be getting proper enforcement where there is an ability to ticket. So therefore, the police should be doing that element, is why community speed watch is not appropriate there, because the speeds are too high. Yes, there's a health and safety element, but I would suggest the overarching is that there should be community speed watching. It requires an enforcement. And I'd be interested to know in the site that you refer as to whether there is now some ongoing enforcement, which means that it hasn't worked out as it should be, because that's what should happen. We should get the measurement done by the highway authority or the police, and if the average speed in the 85th percentile is a certain limit, that should result in some enforcement. And if there are particular instances, I'm always keen to hear from councillors, and I happily raise it with the force.
Thank you, Tracy.
I'll be very, very quick.
Thank you.
I know that you've done two lots of work. One with the York carriageway section of the Bewdley bypass. I keep thinking the word underpass is coming to mind. Following an accident there, and I know you've also obviously done the speed cameras. I'm very supportive of the works at Bewdley, and you did the speed cameras on the A449, which of course I'm less supportive of because I use that road a lot more. So personally, it's a bit of a pain. But I just wondered, because we've got so many roads across West Mercia that are 60-mile-an-hour roads because they're country roads, and that's only 10 miles an hour below a motorway where there's nothing coming in the other direction, there's no junctions. And so I just wondered, on the A449 where you have put the cameras in, have you had any results of whether they've been effective or not? Because I know, you know, you did a lot of investment in it.
So the A456 is that section referring through to Bewdley, out through to Clouds Top, and the 449 Killers Worcester. The 449 ton average speed camera scheme is referred to, shown to bring the average down, the average 85th percentile down. I haven't got the latest stats, but shown caught a lot of people to start with, but that of course tapers off as you see behaviour change. I think the 456 out from Bewdley out to Clouds Top, the interesting point earlier from Councillor Taylor around the road out through Popford as you go to Bridgenorth up into North Shropshire. These are often high volume routes. They're often routes followed by bikers in certain time of year and alike, and unfortunately disproportionately represented on the collision data and the fatalities as a result. The bit I use the bit through Bewdley through to Clouds Top. You'll be in a 50, a 40 or 30 on a main road, and you will turn off and go through a de-restriction sign where you can then go 60 miles an hour. Yeah. Yes, we do need better, more consistent speed limits and designed roads, but we also need the human behind the wheel to know that just because you can go 60 miles an hour, that it's not a target. Yeah. It's a limit for a reason, and that's why the education bit. I know you'll never have been on a speed awareness course, but that is about upskilling and understanding around how you behave rather than the wagging the finger.
Couldn't possibly comment about speed awareness courses, Chairman, obviously.
I would hope not. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, next agenda item, number 9, is regarding the appointment of a lay independent and voting member of the West Mercia Police and Crime Bureau. You'll remember last time we said our farewells to Carol Clive after her second 4-year term. Got some resilience, that lady. What we must do now is get another lay member. So request or the recommendation of the papers, which recommended that the panel appoints members to an appointments panel to conduct the recruitment process and appoint to a late independent elected member vacancy. Now, I and our vice chairman will make 2 of those. We need 1 more. So anybody interested in? Done. Right. Moving on from that. Any other points? Okay. Commissioner, it's that time again. If you wish to stay for the work programme, we're delighted to. Thank you for coming. Chairman.
I know. Can you go on and on?
Right, you've all had copies of the work programme. Anybody got any comments? Next one is where we are, 5th of February. In that we've got the proposed precept, in which have we got any that's for the budget?
Chairman, 2 members expressed interest in the budget categories in the pre-meeting. That was Casey Underslow and John Gallagher. Actually, is there anybody else interested in the budget category?
It operates around about primarily in January. Well, come on, have some more fun.
You could send us an email out, because there are some members giving copies today.
We'll do that. So, and those that are really, thank you very much for your assistance.
Yes, Jack, you done it.
Let's get this. Right, so we got the budget precept, which is part of that. We've got police and crime activity performance monitoring, and we've got update on rural crime, annual report on complaints, and an update on the inspection of the West Midlands serious organised crime. That's quite a task. And we've also got a situation relating to the Q2 report, which we don't want to leave till February. So we need an email up for that. Yeah. So are we content with the next set of papers for the scrutiny?
As we put, I don't say it should be agended for an immediate meeting, but I do think we ought to look at hate crime at some stage. It's in a rural area, it can often be underreported, and I can't see anything about it in the reports we've had. So
Hate crime is alluded to in the report of the doors today.
I didn't see that. Okay, no problem.
But no, it's a very valid issue that needs to be addressed.
There you go on the list of potentials for consideration.
I will ask you next time we meet to raise that as a point.
Do you think maybe you might bring an inspector with him next time? Because, you know, the inspectors are quite handy, especially with rural crime. They maybe have a little bit more on the edge of, you know, yes, that's right. Because we do at my rural, because I have 5 parishes altogether. Well, we do get the police officers come to those, but they never come to the town council.
Yeah, you would normally bring the chief constable, but is he officially on the ground as you would expect? You would have the information.
Yeah, but
Unfortunately, apologies to that.
They're not very close to it, are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Right, okay, so we're happy for the next one, and we'll discuss the July one at that meeting. Right, thank you very much. The meeting is now coming to a close at 13:29.